You know, you've chosen over time to share your experience with the public, but that was not your first instinct when you first got an inkling that something was wrong.
Oh, this is nice. We can get used to this.
You don't understand.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. You have to understand, you know, we walk into the studio every morning around 6:35, 6:40. We don't get cheers like that. This is really nice.
And these hours are much better.
Much better. Yeah, we're on the other side of the cycle right now. You should also just give you a little insight into what morning television does to you. Right before we came out, they asked us, so which chairs do you want to sit in? And we didn't really care. And then we thought, well, wait, we can only talk to each other if I'm on your left and you're on the right.
Exactly.
It's the only way it can go. You all obviously know Robin. You watch our show, but I really do hope you read the book, because I feel like I know Robin pretty well after almost 5 years co-anchoring at Good Morning America. But the book, when you get a chance to read it, you'll see it is the Robin you know, but then with layer after layer after layer added. And it's so vibrant, in some places so raw, but always so real that I think it's an experience you'll be grateful for having. Let's start out though right at the beginning, because you know you've chosen over time to share your experience with the public, but that was not your first instinct when you first got an inkling that something was wrong.
No, it wasn't at all. And you know me very well, and what really struck me is after you read it and you learned things that you didn't know, and you were sitting this close to me through much of it. And going back to my original diagnosis with breast cancer in 2007, I had no desire whatsoever to go public with it, because I had no idea what the outcome would be, and it was just something that's anybody who's gone through it, it's so incredibly personal. And there was also a part of me that I've always done the right thing. I love being here at the Y. I was a member of the Y on the Gulf Coast and the Boys and Girls Clubs, and always very active and making sure I ate the right things, and except for Popeyes. I did make an exception for Popeyes. And so I was just really taken aback, but then I realized that was a lesson in itself to people to know that, hey, you can do the right things and something like this could still happen. So how do you deal with it? And it was my mom who said, make your mess your message. That I have a great job, I have colleagues, I have people at home, I have family, friends, faith, all these things that are going to help me get through it. And not everyone facing a challenge like I was facing has that. So be their voice, which was what I attempted to do.
You did, and then, after the breast cancer, like you say, you took good care of yourself. You ate right, you exercised. As you say, you were doing all the right things, yet at some point, I guess it's in February,
right?
Now what, 3 years ago?
Right.
Now that you started to feel tired.
And which we normally do. It's like we have perpetual jet lag is what it feels like when you're getting up at 3:45 and you're working.
So at first you shrug it off.
Yeah, I'm thinking like everybody else, like, oh, I'm gonna feel better. It's just this and that, and I already thought I've already been through the wars, so this is not going to be that again. And then I realized I was at the Oscars in 2012 and just was not feeling well, and I felt a little nodule in my neck, and I'd had it biopsied because I'd gone back after you go through cancer and you have your blood checked to make sure everything is okay, so I'd done that on a regular basis, and I really wasn't that concerned, and my doctor wasn't either, but said, since you're here, you haven't, let's draw some blood, and initially it came back a little lower, and she thought too that, well, maybe, you just came back from the Oscars, you're a little run down, maybe it's a little virus you picked up, so let's wait a little bit longer. And sure enough, it turned out to be MDS, myelodysplastic syndrome, which at one time was known as pre-leukemia. And I'm thinking, how, I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, I've been through already one time. And it was just one of those rare occasions, and I want to make it abundantly clear that I am grateful for the treatment that I received for breast cancer. It saved my life. I'm triple negative. It's a very rare form of breast cancer, and they did what they needed to do to save my life at that time. Unfortunately, I fell into that small category. In fact, my oncologist, who's been practicing for decades, I think I was only the third patient that ever happened. And it was because of the treatment. So it wasn't anything I did. It was, and you can imagine that conversation. So I'm sitting across from the doctor. I'm like, so it's something you did? I didn't, let me get this clear. You did this to me? And they were like, yes, it's one of those rare occasions that it happened.
And you also actually made a rare mistake for you when you first heard about this. You actually went online and tried to learn about it.
Yes, I know. And here, how many times on our program when we tell, do not go to MDS.com and whatnot. But I had never heard of myelodysplastic syndrome. I remember the doctor, because I had some initial tests, and he said, I had gone away on vacation, came back, and I was sitting by myself, and he called, and he said, we think it might be myelodysplastic syndrome, MDS. And I said, I have multiple sclerosis. He goes, no, not MS, you have MDS. So I'm like talking to him, and I'm on my computer, my iPad, and I'm looking at, and I'm just starting to panic. And because it usually presents itself in someone who's older. Usually they have underlying health conditions. So I wasn't taking that into account. I was just looking at survivability and what's a bone marrow transplant. And even when my doctor first said to me, when I had the bone marrow aspiration and I was about to head off on vacation, I said, what's the worst case scenario? We're talking to your doc, being all, And he goes, you may need a bone marrow transplant. And I was oblivious, and I, just said, well, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. And he just turned to me like, you have no idea, honey. and I didn't, but I did go online, and that's where I got a lot of my information.
You're also a competitive person, very competitive. And this is all happening at the time. This was 2 years ago. Man, it did feel like 3 years ago.
I know, exactly.
2 years ago when, after 10 years for you on the program, we start to make a lot of progress. And it looks like for the first time in 17 years.
852 weeks.
Or 852 weeks.
Who was counting? You were.
Good Morning America could beat the Today Show for a week. And so we're driving and driving. That's nice.
That's nice.
We're driving and driving and driving, but you're living in two completely separate worlds at this time.
That's life. I remember this, and you were really taken aback when I did finally in June tell you what I was going through, and I was diagnosed back in April. Right, you had no idea. But think about this. So for 852 weeks, we're chipping away, and we're and there's so many people that are involved in Good Morning America and the production of that. And yes, I'd been there for 10 years.
Machine.
Oh, a big machine. And I'd been there for 10 years, and there are a lot of people behind the scenes that have been there a lot longer. So it was a huge deal that we were finally becoming number one. So it's April 19th, 2012. We are outside finishing up the show about 8:30, and we have what we call an IFB. It's like a little earpiece that's in our ear. And
kills your hearing, by the way.
Yeah, it does. And then our producer, Tom Sobrowski, because I was the one that had been there the longest, he whispered in my ear, he said, we did it. We did it. We're number one. So I'm looking around, and I'm waiting for him to tell everybody else. And I don't know if I should say something. And so it's like, it was wonderful to see each one hear it. I know, pick it up. And we're so happy. And we go inside, and we have a champagne toast and this whole thing. And I know that I have a doctor's appointment later that day. And it's in the back of my mind, of course, but it was nice to have that diversion for a while. And anyone going through any kind of health crisis or any kind of crisis, it's just nice to work and be in a normal kind of situation. And so after leaving the celebration, going to see the doctor, and he still could sense that I wasn't quite grasping the severity of my condition. And so he put all the information in the computer, and he's talking to me, and he's talking about, what a bone marrow does and all these things. And I'm still looking at him, and he turned the computer screen, and there was a line, there was a graph, and it had 1, 2, and there was a dot in the middle. And I said, what's that dot in the middle? And I said, is that how much time I have to figure out what I need to do? And he goes, no, that's your life expectancy. And I'm thinking, I was just sipping champagne. You know, I was like, and now you're telling me that I might not be here long enough. And I left the appointment with my girlfriend, Amber. We went to a funeral, a homegoing service for Karen Leo, a longtime producer of mine. Her mother had passed away from cancer, but we were there to support her. And then we had this party on the rooftop later that night.
A beautiful night.
It was a great April night, and I'm doing the limbo, how low can you go with Sam and all that. And there was a moment when I saw Ben Sherwood, the president of our division, and I'm like, do I tell him? And I'm looking at him, and everyone's so happy. And I'm like, how can I go up to them and say, oh, by the way, I got some really bad news today? I just also wanted to be in that moment of just enjoying it and just saying, life is a journey. It's not a destination. There are no mistakes. There's chances we've taken. Lay down your regrets. All we have is now. That was a lyric from my song with Indy Ari, by the way. A Beautiful Day. Also on sale. No, it's not. No, sorry. No, it's not. It's not.
I think that is one of your signature strengths. So you are able to turn off, or it certainly appears that you're able to do it, to turn off the negative and focus on the here and now, and channel that optimism, which ends up being an incredible strength.
Optimism is a muscle that gets stronger with use. You know, you gotta use it. And I was in such a habit of that. So when this came along, I'm used to being optimistic and trying to see that silver lining and trying to see anything that's positive about the situation that I'm in. So even something as dire as this really helps me. And I'm a real, and I know you meditate and you yoga and those things, and I do too. And I really think, the mind is, you have to change the way you think in order to change the way you feel. And I felt great professionally, and personally, not so much. But then, you never know what someone is facing.
But because you believe in the power of optimism, and I think this is an important lesson for everybody as well, it led you to do something that I think I probably wouldn't do. You were meeting with one doctor who was, you nicknamed him Dr. Doom and Gloom.
Yes.
And
can't wait to hear from her, read the book.
And you say, no way, that's not my doctor.
And that's, there's so many different lessons I feel in the book. And one of them is, if you don't like the doctor that you have, find another doctor. Please find another doctor. And there are plenty of good ones. And even this one, who, yes, I refer to as Dr. Doom and Gloom, came highly recommended. She is an excellent physician, but not for me. Not for me. And there was, I remember our colleague and friend Diane Sawyer, when I told her this, and because at first I was like, I can't change. I'm Southern. I can't do that. That'd be rude.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be rude to tell. She's smart. She's a physician. And Diane's like, no, this is your life, and you have to find someone who speaks to you. So to make that transition was something that I think was very vital. But you know how I found the doctor that I ultimately have and I love? The same way on television. I know, the very medium I've dedicated my professional life to, and it gave me this great gift. It was the day of the diagnosis, June 11th. I was with my sister Sally Ann, and I had made the announcement that morning, and then I was beginning treatment that day. That's why I waited until that time, because I knew what the game plan was, and I didn't want to say anything to anyone, even you, until I knew what I had and how I was going to face it, and I had a fighting chance. So it's June 11th. We make that announcement that morning. It was very emotional. A lot of sometimes I just feel like a vacuum. I feel that our GMA viewers are a family, and I forget that other people are watching, and that they then put it on CNN and all these other outlets. So my sister and I, I'm getting chemo, turn the TV on, it's on CNN, and they're doing a story on what happened that morning. And after the correspondent, the anchor, interviewed this doctor, Dr. Gail Robos, and she started talking. She's not my doctor at the time. I understood more about my condition from this woman than I had from my doctor that was standing right next to me at the time. And the doctor left the room, and the nurse was there, and she could tell I was just really moved by this woman. And she said, "You want her number?" From another hospital. I'm like, yeah, you got it? She goes, yeah. And she slipped me her number. And when I went home from that first day of treatment, I called Gail, and she was very professional. She knew I was seeing another doctor, and she said I could consult with her and whatnot. My sister Sally was in the car with me, and she could tell the difference how I was after talking to Gail, and so I just went about the way of just making the transition. And there were two doctors. One was an MDS specialist, and one was a transplant specialist. The MDS specialist is the one I'm referring to that was not my style. It was a little awkward. The other doctor could not have been more professional. Totally understood that I wanted to go in a different direction, and was really, so I think it's your life, so don't be shy.
You find the doctor you like, but you still have to prepare yourself for what seems to me like the most brutal treatment possible. First, over the course of the summer, they basically have to kill everything in your body.
Without killing you. So it's a fine line, because the condition that I had, my bone marrow was not acting correctly. It was compromised, and my blood. And so they, in essence, had to completely wipe out my immune system, the very thing that keeps us alive. They had to completely destroy it and then insert, and thankfully I had a perfect match in my sister Sally Ann, and then insert her stem cells into a small port. The actual transplant is not even a transplant. Well, it is a transplant, but it's a needle. It's just a needle full of stem cells that are, it's anticlimactic, everything leading up to it. But there were 10 days of chemo. The way they wipe out your immune system, 10 consecutive days you have to be in the hospital, and the last chemotherapy is nicknamed the rabbit. And the reason it's the rabbit is because you feel it running all around in your body, looking for anything the previous chemo may have missed. It's like looking under potholes and throwing in little grenades, and you just feel your body going all like this, and it completely wipes you out. They then say you have a day of rest. I never understood what rest was that after 10 days, and then the transplant.
And then bring everybody inside that room, for a moment, because it is a remarkable scene. You're fairly weak, but you're about to be given an amazing gift.
It's called your birthday. I'm not even 2 years old. I'll be 2 years old in September. And it is a rebirth, because you are being brought back to life in every sense of the word. So we're in the room, and it's anybody that's very close to me, they're there. I had my pastor come, and he blessed the syringe before inserting it. We were singing hymns, and I know we haven't mentioned, but just less than a week or so before that, my mother had passed away. So I was really, I was so glad my two sisters were there, because it helped me, because I just kept asking about Mom, what do you think she would think, and all those things. So there was such an emotional aspect to it, and anything that we face is like that, and especially this, it was as much mental as it was physical. I had more problems mentally dealing with it than the physical aspect of it. In many ways.
And that was in your birthday, and in many ways another beginning. And at first, when it happens, you don't really know whether it's going to take.
No, you have the transplant, and then you're just kind of like sitting around waiting to see. My sister and I didn't get along well as kids, so I was really worried that her cells were going to, my cells were going to go, hey, what are you doing in here? Get out of here, because my cells were very aggressive. So you sit and you wait, and you're basically in isolation. Anyone who comes in to see you, they have masks and gloves, and they're completely covered. You don't have to have a mask. I would look out my hospital window, and the door had a window, just so I could see a full face. And I felt like I had swallowed a blowtorch. It was completely raw. It was very difficult to eat. I was on pain medication, and a lot of it I forgot until writing the book. I kept a journal. Our family is very big about writing a journal, and a wonderful co-writer I worked with, Veronica Chambers, who just really was able to tap into me and get things that I had forgotten. One thing I had forgotten when I was hallucinating, I remember the elephants floating around the room. That part I do remember, but I forgot that the nurse came in, and she later said, she was laughing, and I said, what's so funny? She said, oh, I came in last night and you were interviewing Walter Cronkite at the foot of your bed. Well, what I wouldn't have given to see that. And she said, it was quite a
some
scene.
interview,
Yeah,
yeah.
it must have been, yeah. But then I thought, well, at least I knew who I was. I'm still a reporter, so I think that's got, that's the silver lining. But it did take me just to know how far I was and where I am now. Just really, I can't believe it sometimes.
This is a book about the power of love as well, the love of your family. You mentioned Amber, and one of the things that's really special and different about this book is that we see and hear her voice.
You were very excited about that when you read that.
I was surprised by it, but again, and this isn't. I think not only is it riveting to read, but it's an important lesson as well. You think when you're ill, when you're going through something difficult, everyone talks about the love and support of the family and how wonderful that is, and it is. It's all the difference in the world. But both you and Amber are open in the book about the tensions it creates as well.
She was my primary caregiver. She was the gatekeeper, and sometimes she closed the gate because she didn't want anyone to see me in that state, though she had to see me like that. And I thought it was, and a lot of people have come up to her when we are out signing, book signings and things, caregivers come up to her thanking them, because you're right about the love of the family, and it's really great, but there are many relationships that do not make it. I can remember one time, which I wrote about in the hospital, I thought we were going to get tossed out because we're yelling at each other and you were going at it. And it's also interesting how the caregiver and the patient, how we have two different points of view on a certain situation. But what she really imparts in the book in talking to caregivers about having to take care of themselves, that if you're into yoga or you're into something and you have to find that time for yourself. But what was also very helpful, because I was on so many different medications, that one time I snapped at her, which it should have been a 2, but it was off the Richter scale when I snapped. And I was all ready for bear, like, okay, you're going to fight back. What are you going to say? And she goes, that's the prednisone talking, that's not you.
Smart.
And that's a steroid. And I was like, wow, how did she know? And it was true. And she's just like, no, I'm not going to. It was almost like not a fair fight. You're not going to remember it anyway, so I'm going to let it go.
I'm going to switch it up a little bit and take some of the questions we were getting from the audience as well. And this is from, I'm not
go ahead.
Glasses.
I have mine in
Sorry,
the back.
guys. I'll pull it out. From Artemis Sagaris, good Greek name. Can you describe the transition
That's why he took it, yes.
from sports broadcasting to world news broadcasting?
Pardon? What?
Can you describe the transition from sports broadcasting to world news broadcasting?
Wow, I have to say, and you're an athlete too, you were a wrestler back in the day. I was, and still in my heart of hearts, I'm an athlete. And I wanted to be a professional athlete. I was tiddlywinks, tennis, I don't care. I just wanted to play professional sports, but I didn't have that ability. You're right, I knew there was something that was missing. Had the heart and the desire, not the ability. So being a sports journalist was my way of being an athlete. I loved covering the original Dream Team in 1992, going to Barcelona. Oh, it was just great, and covering Wimbledon and all these events. And it was just something that just was, I never worked a day in my life. The 15 years that I was at ESPN, that's how I felt. And then I realized that everywhere I was going in local markets, I started in in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Biloxi, Nashville, and then 1990, then Atlanta, and then 1990 to ESPN, and I was living happily ever after, because it is the worldwide leader in sports. That was it. I was happy doing NFL prime time with Chris Berman, Boomer, and TJ. And all along the way, though, in the local markets, it was deemed to be more prestigious to do news. And so I was well received by the audience. So the news directors were always like, oh, come on, you want to do news? And I'm like, no, I really enjoy what I'm doing. And then I realized, and this happens to many of us, that I was saying no out of a habit, that I didn't really feel that way anymore when people would say, don't you want to do news? No. And then it just dawned on me, why am I continuing to say that? I was getting older. I was still enjoying ESPN, but I knew there was more that I wanted. And it's hard to venture outside of your comfort zone. And so I did that. And sports is a great training ground because it's all live. So I remember my first days doing news and going into the studio, and I was just able to, because when you go to a sporting event, there's no teleprompter, there's no There's no script, you're just describing the action. And I was just so pleasantly surprised how well received I was by people in the news division, and especially by the audience. And had I not made that transition, had I not been willing to venture outside of my comfort zone, and it was a dear friend of mine, Billie Jean King, who really gave me that final push, because I went to her when I was receiving the offer to go to GMA, and I thought that she would say, oh, you can't leave us in the sports world. We need you here the way, you know, you're doing basketball and all these things. We need you. And she looked at me like, what is it, Cher? And like, well, snap out of it, you know, almost slapped me like, you know, of course you. And so I can still do sporting events where I am, but I don't limit myself anymore.
I totally get that. I mean, I made a similar transition coming from doing almost all politics
Right.
to then broadening out to GMA, and talk about getting outside your comfort zone at first, no question about that. But I think, you know, what's great about the morning show, it's every day, and you literally have no idea what's going to happen.
It's great.
You know, it's 6:45 or 6:50, and then you throw out all the books, you throw out all the scripts, and just start doing what you're trained to do. And there's nothing like that on the one hand. And also, and I was just thinking about our show this morning, usually Thursday, we all share tough days in the morning. Thursday is usually my day where I'm the most tired. You used to do Tuesday. Yes.
Tuesday. Mm-hmm.
And everybody has their own day where they're a little more tired. But this morning, this incredible 17-year-old violinist.
Yuki.
comes into the studio and, you know, just throws joy throughout the entire studio, and you have moments like that almost every day, and it's just you're exposed to so many different parts of humanity that it makes it a lot of fun.
No 2 days are the same. There's always something different. And I remember after she performed, and because you know, it's a long week, and I've been out on the West Coast, and I was kind of, you know, the day we had yesterday, all that rain, and she plays that song, and we are just like little kids. It is. It's like those little moments.
Yeah, it's good. And this is the new segment that Michael Strahan does with us as well.
Open
it's been
mic.
Fun to have
Open mic. It's been great to have Michael. Yeah.
He's got some fans too. Okay, no name on this one, but Robin, what is the one thing that you have never done but would love to do?
My pilot's license. Yes, my father was a Tuskegee Airman. I love flying. Thank you. Yes, being a pilot was Plan B if the broadcasting didn't work out. And when I started, I went to school in Louisiana. I've had my sister Sally Ann is also a news journalist, and so I was interested in what she was doing, but I wanted to do sports. But early on in college, I was the local news anchor at the local station in town before switching to sports. And it was the end of my freshman year, and I was like, this is not for me. So I said, Daddy, I want to drop out of school. And I want to join the service. I want to become a pilot. And my parents, they were the first in their families to go to college. They met at Howard University. I'm the youngest of four. Yes, Tyson. I'm the youngest of four, and they take great pride in that all of their children have a college education. And I was the last one, but I was going to break that streak. And my parents were just so wonderful in how they approached everything. They would never freak out, though I know they wanted to. And my dad said, okay, I'll help you study for the officer candidacy test. If you pass that test, you have our blessing, you can drop out, join the service. If not, you have to go back to school. I went back to school. I failed that test miserably, and I still feel that he kind of rigged that test a little bit, but that's my personal story. But when I saw Captain Sullenberg land, I actually saw the miracle landing. I was in my apartment. At the time I was on.
Hey, you reported, right? You called.
I called in. I remember Charlie was working. I called in, so I happened to be home that afternoon. Rare time I was home that afternoon. At the time I was on the 11th floor, and the plane flew by. So I'm like, not the penthouse, 11th floor. So I'm like, that's a little low. I'm not, I'm not on the top of this. And so I ran out onto the balcony. I happened to be talking to Karen Leo, my producer at the time. Still is, and I was talking to her on the phone, and I'm watching it go down, and she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, there's a plane, and it hit the water, and it was a landing. It wasn't a crash landing, it was a landing. Sully used it as a runway, the river. And I yelled to Karen, call the people, tell the people. I hang up the phone, I'm like, what do I do? I call 911. I'm like, I'm calling 911. How do I explain to them that there's a plane in the river? And then I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be recorded. So I don't want to seem like a crazy woman. So I try and describe, where I thought it was in the river and all that. And Sully and I became friends, and he offered me flying lessons. So that's my one thing I want to still do, take those lessons.
And that is the blessing and the curse of being on GMA, because we have to fill 2 hours a day. Because you wanted to do that, you get to fly.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to be careful of what you wish
That's
for.
true.
Though. You don't
That's
know what
true.
the producers
That's
are going to
true.
make you go do. And we actually do have to think about that every morning, believe me. What is the one thing you know?
What is the one thing I know? I know that I am stronger than I thought I was. I know that with all certainty. I was always flattered when people would say, "You're a strong woman." And I was like, okay. I know, having gone through what I have in recent years, especially losing my mother in the manner in which I did, so close to transplant. And I mean, she passed on a Thursday, and that's Monday I was supposed to have the transplant. And I went home to Mississippi, and she had had a stroke about 6 weeks earlier, and we thought she was making a turn for the better, and then she just didn't. And so Sally Ann was with me because she was having her stem cells harvested at that time, and there was a hurricane that was hitting the coast. It was like everything was happening. So we rush home, get there in time for Mom, and I knew that I wouldn't leave her like that, and that I was going to stay. And my family was like, "You got to go back." And I'm like, "I'm not leaving Mom like this," because once you go into isolation, start the process, if something had happened, I wouldn't have been able to get home. And I was like, that's not going to happen. And when she passed, and all this happened, and I was thinking, I am so weak. I'm never going to be able to do this. I've never even stubbed a toe without my mom being there to lift me up. And then I realized that my mom, and my siblings said the same thing, gave me this, as only a mom can do, realized that I needed to go back. And so it was as if she said, "I got this, daughter. And so I'm going to pass where I can help you. You don't have to worry about me. I don't have to worry about you." And then when I thought I was at my weakest, my mother proved to me how strong I am. And I looked at her and I was like, "How did you know I could be this strong?" So that's one thing I know for sure.
It was a gift.
Yeah, it was a gift. Yeah.
And later, you know, you're progressing, you're going through the treatment. And I remember from the outside feeling most scared a little bit later down the road when you were further along, the stem cells were taking, but you caught that flu.
Oh my goodness, there's so many things. I mean, I was fortunate that I didn't have graft versus host disease, which a lot of people after a transplant, they have to worry about that. And so I got through that. Then I had an infection because, again, your immune system, I had to give away my precious little KJ, my Jack Russell, who's 16 years old, because I couldn't have my dog around me. All the sanitizer that was around the house, you had to constantly make sure that you were trying to stay as germ-free as possible. And I did the thing, and I wrote about this too, which is so important, even if it's not MDS or whatever, being non-compliant. And I thought that, oh, okay, I got this, I'm better.
I figured it out.
I figured it out. I don't need to take this much of these medications. And I stopped, and I got walking pneumonia, and it almost did me in. So it was another just stark reminder that you may think you have it figured out. You know, we talked about antibiotics today. You're supposed to take the drugs that the doctors give you, and there's a reason for it. And I had to learn that the hard way. But that was scary because I really wanted to. Once I left the hospital after 30 days, it was my goal not to go back in, and I had to go back a couple of times. But there was this wonderful person, and this is part of the reason why I wrote the book. I never knew anybody who went through this, and I hope I meet this guy one day, and probably the GMA producers will arrange it. His name is Scott. He had this blog. He was about the same age as I, and all the kind of similar. And I would look to him, and he was about 6 months ahead of me in the process. So when I got sick after going back to work, and I was kind of panicking, I went on the blog, and I'm like, oh, Scott, that happened to him too. Okay, he went back to work, and it didn't quite work out. Oh, he had the same thing. So it was very helpful to know the path that someone else had taken before me.
What else has changed for you physically since the transplant? How did your regimen, your diet, your exercise? how you feel every day?
I'm doing more of Pilates, yoga, just really, there's this thing we talked about today again, I walk. And we live in the greatest city to do that. Just walking, getting out. I lost about 40 pounds. I've gained about a half of it back. I'm good. I'm good. I know it's funny. The doctors are like a little. No, I actually like this. But I'm a woman who, I'm sorry. But the physical change in my appearance. But what I've done is I really eat very clean. I shouldn't say this, but I really think in the beginning with the breast cancer, I really feel at the time that the processed foods that I ate, that even though I don't eat a lot of meat or things like that, I'm not a vegetarian by any stretch, but I just felt that some of the things that I was doing, and so I really have been very, very, very careful of everything that I eat.
Well, and you were always careful before, and actually, I mean, this is something you guys probably would intuit, but you actually have to take better care of yourself even if you're doing well in our jobs, because just to get through the schedule
it's
every
just
day.
I know. And then you see us on the show all the day, every day eating. I mean, and it was really bad when Diane was there, because she was like, let's dip Snickers into cotton candy, deep fry it, and see what it tastes like. She was always into that weird kind of like, I ain't taking that bite on the air. But one thing I will say, no, being health conscious did not prevent me from getting ill, but I'm telling you, as we are here at the Y, it has helped in the recovery. And so it is so important to be active and to do all these things, and even if it doesn't prevent you from getting ill, it really helps in the recovery process, no doubt about it.
And we've seen that, and you were committed to come back to work as soon as you were able, but you were kind of chomping at the bit for a while there.
Yeah, again, anybody that's faced something, you just want normalcy. And for me, believe it or not, 3:45 a.m. wake-up call is normal. And being around the people that you enjoy being with. And Charlie said this, Charlie Gibson, we get to say, good morning, America. We get to say to America, good morning. There's no better feeling. So that's why I just really wanted to get back and to do that. And but I think that's what all people really want.
And we will never forget the morning you came back and got to say it again.
I waited 174 days to say this. Good morning, America. Yeah, it was great with my two little hairs on my head. Why didn't anybody tell me that? It's really funny, because I look back and I thought I was all good. I'm like, why didn't someone tell me that this is how I look coming back?
My job in the morning is to tell Lara that she's got lipstick on her teeth.
That's true.
It is true, actually.
Yeah.
Now, you're going to stay and sign books. I'm bailing on this, I tell you, because I have an even earlier wake-up call than you. But before we go, I do want to get one final question from the audience, and it's a good one. What most inspires you today?
Oh, what most inspires me today? That is a good one. I'm always struck when people say that I provide some sort of inspiration. That's extremely humbling. It's important for people to know that I draw strength from their stories. When I do a book signing in LA, it always takes so long because everyone wants to share their story with me, and people think, oh, that must be so draining, and it's not. I have been so drawn to my faith, and one of the best emails that I received after announcing about publicly going about my condition was from this man right here. You sent me, I was in Knoxville at the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, and you sent me, it was just beautiful, it had scripture, and I know your family. Wow. I really draw great strength and inspiration from the stories of others, from just being, and just really, for the first time, and I know we all say this about being in the now and being in the moment, but there's just something that is so precious. As tired as we all are, and we were today, I mean, we were excited about coming out here. I'm excited to meet some folks, and I just think that that's it. And all I want to say in closing, because I know you have to leave, for George to come out here, he does not do nighttime events. He does not do nighttime events. he didn't hesitate to want to be a part of this and be a part of the conversation. And there were many lessons that I learned through this whole process. And one is to surround yourself with people, friends who are family and family who are friends. And the lesson that George and Lara and Sam Champion at the time and Josh Elliott, what they did was to show the world how you care for a colleague, a friend who is going through a very difficult time. And the way that they did it, it was magical. I mean, I watched them between my toes for 6 months, and to know that I had a home to come back to, and I know a lot of people going through things like this, they don't have that security, but to know that I had a home to come back to, and to know that I wanted to come back home meant everything.
Well,
so thank you,
it's an honor
George.
for all of us to say good morning to you every morning. It was even better when you came back.
Great.
Robin Roberts.
Thank you all. Thanks, George.